Welcome to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. All right, we're back with our part 2 in a little mini series around podcast planners and why we need them. So we're going to go a little deeper. Last episode, we kind of talked high level, some basic stuff that we need to kind of start off. It's why it's at the top of the sheet. So this is going to get a little bit into more of some of the other deeper areas that you're going to need to talk to a podcast host about when you sit down and draft out a plan to work together as podcast editors, as a support person, and as a podcast host. So I'm glad you're here. If you're interested in a copy of my podcast planner that I use when I talk to new clients, you can find it at podcasteditingandsupport.com. Reach out to me there, and I'll gladly send you a free copy. No charge. Not at all. It's there for you. We're going to look today at maximizing your podcast success through effective behind-the-scenes management. Beyond the ums and ahs, we do much more than that, everyone. We're here to support you as a podcaster and make your job easier so that you'll come back and do more podcasts. So some key points we're going to cover today. We're going to look at streamlining the content planning and production side of your podcast, enhancing the audio quality and the post-production efficiency of your podcast, optimizing distribution and audience growth strategies, and leveraging data analytics for continuous improvement. Sounds like a lot of stuff. Yeah. That's what we do here. We cram it all in here to help you. So you ready? Okay, here we go. As podcast editors and virtual assistants support people in podcasting, we play a vital role in our clients' podcast success. Your behind-the-scenes work can greatly impact the quality, consistency, and the growth of the audience for the podcasters that you work for. So this guide that we're working through, this is the second part in our little mini-series. This guide is designed to help you enhance your services and become indispensable as an asset to the podcast hosts and clients you work with. Okay? So today we're going to start with streamlining the content planning and production side. What does this mean? How do we do it? All the great stuff. This is the first part. Streamlining, content planning, and production. So there's going to be some overlap from episode to episode, but that's good because it reinforces what we've been talking about here on the show. The first part here is the content calendar management. There's a lot of different tools that we can use. I hear people talk about Trello, Asana. There's a lot of different, these Monday.com. There's all these different ones that you can use to kind of communicate back and forth. It's going to be kind of hit and miss when you're first starting out to figure what works with you. At the very least, the beginning stages, you can use Google. There's ways for you to communicate with each other. You're going to have to figure out what works best for you. I would suggest, because to keep this podcast evergreen and not have an expiry date with all of the new platforms that are going to come out, even while I'm recording, somebody's creating a new platform for managing your clients and connecting with your clients and all of that. There's going to be tons of new ones coming in the future. So the best thing to do is to always look on YouTube, look for a client management software solution, and do the research. Take a look at all of the ones recommended. I love watching YouTube channels when they do this product versus this product, and they show you the differences, the good, bad, and the ugly for the two, and then you can kind of get a sense of what works for you. If you just want to have a conversation around this, always reach out to me. Happy to have a conversation anytime to help you with this. We need to come up with some kind of software, some kind of platform, some kind of system to communicate between podcast editors and support people and the podcast itself so that we can keep those communication lines open. So try these tools, use them. They're going to help you organize your episodes, help book your guests, stay on time with your timelines. These software tools are amazing. And there's always a new one every day. As well, you're going to be able to help them streamline their content planning and production by helping them with their guest coordination. We can develop templates for our podcast hosts to help them with their outreach and the preparation of documents and behind-the-scenes information so that their interviews go smoothly. We can do that. As well, some podcasts love to use scripts. So as podcast editors and support people, we can actually help be a part of the script development, creating outlines with talking points and links to relevant research and whatever we can do to add to the conversation to make our host look amazing and to make our guests look amazing because we've done all the research on our guests as well. So we can streamline the content planning and production side by helping with the calendar, helping with the guests, and helping with the content. This is, again, much more than ums and ahs. We are so much more than that as podcast editors. The next part is that falls in our lap is the enhancement of audio quality and the post-production efficiency that we can provide in our role as a podcast editor and support person. We talked about this many times. There is the basic ums and ahs, silence, gaps, throwing on an intro music, outro music. Those are pretty standard things that most editors will do. And there are tools coming out all the time that may replace us and not have us to do all those things. So that's not something to be fearful of. It's something to say, listen, I need to develop my talents beyond simple ums and ahs. Because basically anyone can learn how to do that pretty much. And that is not a firm foundation to build a business on. So do more than just ums and ahs. Figure out how you can add value to your clients by doing more advanced editing techniques, mastering noise reduction, EQ, balancing, and using some tools that are going to make your audio podcast sound great. So you're going to need to learn these tools. You can't just download a program or buy a subscription or a monthly plan to a software and then hope you to figure it out. You're going to have to spend some time to learn the tools and understand how it works so you can be efficient. The other thing we can do from an audio quality and post-production efficiency side is all around workflow optimization. Again, creating templates for intros and outros. In all of my 8 podcasts that I do, I start with a master template file for every episode. And it just simply says master template, podcast editing and support show. And in there I have the intro, the outro, the music, everything staged, ready for me to record the content, which is like a sandwich. I put the meat in the middle, the information in the middle, and I have the outro and intro as my sandwich bread on the outside. So it's always there ready for me. Create templates. They really work well, help you to speed up your process, and give you the flexibility just to focus on the content side. Really simple to do, something I would encourage you all to do. And come up with a way to organize your work. Again, if you're going to have more than one client, you're going to have to maintain different files coming at different times, different titles, different processes, different wish lists, different ways of editing for these different shows. So whatever you can do to create organization around the system side of what you do, it's really going to help you as you develop and get more clients. Because you want your business to grow, right? Another side that we can do along audio quality and post-production is in around transcriptions and show notes. Transcriptions are becoming more and more important. And even the old gurus who thought transcriptions were a waste of time, transcriptions are much, much more than being found through a search engine. Transcriptions can be something that helps people who cannot process your information in audio format as it was intended and as it was delivered. They need assistance. So these transcriptions help people to see the words and understand what's being said. And the show notes are the information that you'll see either on a website as a separate post for each episode. A lot of people do this. And there's also the show description, which is what you would see on your phone as you're listening. And it's not as super detailed with downloadables and all of that. It's more of a summary of the content. But these are all things that we can do to make the podcast better beyond the ums and ahs. We need to offer more as a podcast editor and support person. Another key role in all the things that we do in our role is all around optimizing the distribution and the growth of the audience by giving great strategies and supporting our podcasters by being there for them to direct them around distribution and growing their audience. when we're in this role serving our podcasters, we owe them the advantage of understanding how podcasting works. One of the most common complaints from podcast hosting sites like Captivate, Buzzsprout, Spotify for Podcasters, Libsyn, Podbean, Blueberry, all of these different places, one of the emails and one of the contacts they just dread is an email that comes in and says, "Hi, I'm a podcast producer, and for some reason, my podcast that I work with is not on Apple." Or, "I uploaded my episode 3 seconds ago and it's not showing on Spotify. I don't understand how these things work. Can you please explain to me so I can explain to my client why this isn't working?" You, as a podcast editor and support person, need to understand what happens behind the scenes so that you're not asking silly questions that you don't know the answer to because you've never done any research. You need to understand how podcasting works. And then instead of going to the hosting site and asking simple questions, you should be able to answer those questions back to the podcaster that you work for based on the knowledge you've learned. If you don't know about these things, then please don't pretend to know and do your research. It's something that you need to learn. You need to understand how all of the different platforms work. You need to understand that Apple and Spotify have a back-end dashboard where you can actually see how long people listen to an episode, how long they listen to before they stop, episode by episode, and get more detailed information about the listening audience that you're not going to see on your regular podcast hosting site. They can only give you high level. They can't give you that kind of detail. So do you understand how that works? Do you know how to sign into that? Do you have access to that? Can you explain that to your podcast host, the one that's hosting the show, that this is what's happening in your audience? They may not have zero clue or time to go look. So you can be that resource for them. You need to understand how these major platforms like Apple and Spotify and Amazon, all these different platforms, how they work. The other side you can help with around distribution and audience growth is around the social media management side. Now, this has nothing to do with ums and ahs in a podcast recording, but this is something that a lot of hosts of podcasts are looking for, is support on their social media management side. You can help in developing a strategy for promoting episodes through shareable content and community engagement. You could be that resource for them, way above and beyond ums and ahs in an audio recording. The other thing a lot of podcast hosts are looking for is just help with email marketing, whether that's a newsletter or a blog post or something that goes out to the community where you can help maintain their email newsletter and email contacts. So again, it goes way beyond ums and ahs, everybody. Think about what you can do from your side to add more to what your suite of services are so that you're never obsolete by a new tool that can simply go in and remove ums and ahs. We're not going to need you in the future if that's all you can do. Add to your portfolio by investing in multi-platform publishing, understanding podcasting, understanding social media and how that works and what works well, and the trends in social media, as well as email marketing. What can you do to serve your podcaster? And then the last part of all of this is all around leveraging your data that comes in from all of your different sources and how you can help the podcaster continuously improve. Podcasters are so curious about their performance tracking. They want to know how their podcast is doing. But at the same time, many podcast hosts, especially if they're running a coaching business, an actual business, they have teams they're dealing with, they're working full time, and they're doing this on the side, this podcast thing, they don't have time to track their performance. You could offer that to a podcaster to be their resource, to give them quick summaries, updates, emails, texts, to let them know how each episode is doing and report back. That could be part of your service suite that you offer to a podcaster. You can help to monitor all the metrics like downloads and demographics and You could create regular reports for your podcaster to help them understand how their podcast is doing comparisons year to year, month to month, week to week, episode to episode, organizing topics around what they've done. So you group them into different genres and different groups so that they understand this. Our audience really seems to like it when you talk about this. And when you talk about this, we seem to have less engagement. So maybe we talk about that less and focus on what people really like and do that more. You can give them that kind of feedback. Track that performance. The other thing we can do is help with audience feedback analysis. Collecting feedback from listeners to provide actionable insights. Maybe there's comments, suggestions. Maybe there's discussions happening behind the scenes from your audience that don't make their way to the host. And that can be frustrating. If you put out a poll out to your audience and you get responses and then nothing happens with the responses. You want to use that engagement and build upon it. And you could be one of the people in the group that helps facilitate that and grow that. Because audience engagement is very hard to get in the beginning, but it builds over time and it builds upon every success. So you could be the one to make that successful for the podcast, which in turn will keep you occupied and busy and employed by that podcaster. The other thing you can do is be competitive and monitor what's going on, what's happening in the space for other podcasts that talk about and do what your podcast does. So you could monitor and understand what's going on with their competition. So one of the things I use to help monitor my competition, because there's a lot of people who talk about podcasting, is I use pod status. Pod status is a way for me to look at my reviews across different platforms. And as well, I can monitor my competition. I'll pick a podcast that talks about what I do, and I can then go in and see their reviews and see where they're struggling and where their community's saying that they're really good at this and they're not so good at something else. I want to be great, like really great, on the things that my competition is not doing well. Because people are saying, I came to this podcast, I'm going to give it a low rating because they don't cover A, B, and C. I want to be able to see that information and go and then start creating content for A, B, and C and outdo my competition because it's something they're not focused on. Their audience wants it. They're not getting it from their competition, so I can offer that. So imagine going to your podcaster and saying, listen, we talk about business, finances, and accounting. Our competition is really struggling in this area, and I think we could do this as a little mini-series and then promote it and get out there because the audience for that show is not being served. I think we should go in this direction. That's amazing feedback, and that's what podcast editing and support is all about. Beyond the ums and ahs, we're here to help guide and direct this podcast towards success. I think we should trip over success every time we can. It should always be in front of us, something that always ahead of us that we work towards. Trip over your success by doing things right, by being that support for your podcaster. So as we wrap this up, this part is part 2 in our little mini-series. I want you to understand that by mastering these aspects that we've talked about today, this is a side of podcast management that is lacking, that we can step up and fill that gap. You can be a significant advantage and enhance the value that you offer to your clients by participating in doing these things on behalf of your podcaster. Your expertise in planning, production, and distribution, as well as analytics, will drive their podcast into success. You need to be the reason why that podcast is growing. You are not just an expense line. You are an advantage. You are a bonus. You are an income generator, audience generator. You are the reason why podcasts succeed. And again, if all you think you're doing is just ums and ahs and an audio recording, there's so much more for you as a podcast editor. And I want you to reach out and grow what you do and do it in incremental pieces. You don't have to do all this at one time, but do this, add these little pieces here and there. Become the expert, become the go-to person in your space for any one of these things, or as many as you can, so that you are more attractive to a podcast host, because they're fishing. They're looking for people who can do these things. And if they come to a podcaster and all they can do is ums and ah removal, I'm sorry, but I can download an app today that's going to do that for me. I really don't need your services. But if you can do some of the things we talked about today, wow, you're going to set yourself apart from the competition in the space for podcast editing and support. You can charge more money. You can turn this into a business. You can grow this simply by educating yourself. And by being here, that's a good first start. So thanks for listening to the show. Again, if you need any help with anything to do with this, podcasteditingandsupport.com. Love to help you. And stay tuned, because we're going to have another in this little mini-series. Part 3 is coming up. Love for you to check it out. Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupport.com, podcasteditingandsupport.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.